All right, welcome to the next lesson on ancient Rome. So, in the previous few lessons, we've been talking about the wars of expansion that the Roman Republic has been engaged in. First, it was just this idea of like, okay, we need to control our own, protect kind of our area of Latium, our sphere of influence. But after they reformed the legions, and they get a couple more tiffs with some neighbors, they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They finally put down those Etruscans, that persistent threat to the north. They put down the Samnites for the control of basically central Italy. Then they put down the Greeks, who basically were getting afraid of the growing power of the Romans and ended up taking over that. And now they have pretty much all of Italy. And then they get into the massive Punic Wars with Carthage, the First and Second Punic Wars, where, again, just both wars shows just the tenacity and the ability to adapt by the Romans, even when it seems like all was lost, especially in the Second Punic War against Hannibal. Now, as you see the slide I have up at the... Oh, I don't even have the slide up at the moment. I'll fix that. As you see the slide up at the moment, where we're talking about the end of the Second Punic War and the unfortunate end of Hannibal. Well, that's not the last war, basically. There is one more Punic War that I'm going to cover, and I'm just going to do it oh so briefly. Yes, there's a lot more that goes into it, and by the way, there's so much more that goes into those Punic Wars earlier. I hope you understand. I'm going over the basic of basics of just Roman history here. I highly encourage you to basically just look stuff up on your own. If you enjoy this, there's a lot more to be had. Let's put it that way. Anyways, so just briefly, the Third Punic War. Third Punic War, I kind of like to refer to as more like the Third Punic Massacre. It was one-sided. Carthage is not what it was. It's not this massive empire. It's more of just this glorified city-state at this point. Rome is this huge empire. In fact, in between the Second Punic War and the Third Punic War, and I'm totally skipping over this in like lessons and things like this, Rome conquers Greece. They take on Macedonia. They take on the Achaean League. They basically destroy Corinth. It's just, holy cow, they're just running over everybody at this point. They're getting into Asia Minor. And then while they're doing this massive expansion out east, they're also expanding out and attacking a lot of the tribes and things like that, are getting into, I guess you say, conflicts over whatever with tribes in Spain and starting to take over much more territory in Spain, more so than what they got from Carthage at the Second Punic War. So they're just growing and growing and growing and growing. And then just, really this war was just there because, well, people just thought it needed to happen. I don't have any other way to really simplistically explain that. It's just like, people, this just needs to happen. Carthage just needs to go down. We can't, their existence as a free state is just a blight upon us. And there's a lot of people in Carthage who's like, we need to regain our glory. So it's just, a fight was brewing. But when they have this war, again, it is just completely one-sided. The Romans move in, they lay siege to the city. The Carthaginians put up what fight they can, but they don't have much of a chance. And the Romans basically destroy the city. Although the interesting thing here is I will mark it, and I can't remember who said this. I think it was one of the Scipios. Like the grandson or son or something like that of Scipio Africanus. He looks on the destruction of Carthage and is thinking about how great of an empire it once was. And he's like, at what point will this happen to Rome? And it's one of those things where, if he said that or not, we don't really know. It's recorded. This has been written down and talked about over the millenniums. But it just seems like one of those kind of prophetic statements for what's going to happen to Rome, because what I'm going to get into in this video, or I'll explain what happens in the Third Punic War in just a second, at least the very end of it. There's one more thing to say. But in this video, one of the main things I'm going to show you is that how, yes, we've been, I can't just say we. I'm really getting into this Roman thing here. So the Romans have been expanding and expanding and expanding and doing well, and it seems like they're unbeatable. They're on top of their game. And, well, that's just it. They're now on top, you could say. They are the greatest power in the Mediterranean. They've taken out Greece. They've taken out Carthage. Really, no one seems to be able to stand in their way. The only people that can destroy them or end them is, well, themselves. And in this video lesson is where I'm going to start talking about some of the major problems, not all of them, but some of the major problems that starts creeping in little by little on Rome that will end up leading to its eventual downfall, both the downfall of the Republic and ultimately the downfall of the later empire. So again, I can't get into everything. A lot of people like to jokingly say that there's like 500 things that ended Rome, and this is just one of them. It's the idea there's so many things that lead into the fall of Rome, but you could culminate a lot of those things, those 500 things, into really into a few different aspects. And I'll get into that when we get into the very end of Rome. It'll be quite a few videos later, let's put it that way. So, but just one last thing to say about the Third Punic War. Yes, the Romans destroy the city, and to make sure, again, don't know if this is true or not, but knowing Rome, can't put it past them, I guess. It says that once they destroyed Carthage, they desalted the earth, and the symbolic idea is that Carthage will never rise again, and the idea that if you salt the earth, nothing can grow again. That's pretty much what happened. Now Carthage does come back. Carthage becomes a major city again, but it becomes a major Roman city later on, because it's a very strategic area, a good port city, and there's a lot of good farmland all around what is modern-day Tunisia and North Africa. So anyways, it does come back. Just saying, it's not like it was salted and is never more. But those are the ruins of Carthage that you're seeing there in the bottom. Now, going over this one more time, just this expansion. From what we talked about, this map was kind of going into the idea that yes, they took out the Etruscans, the Samnites, the Latin tribes as well. Then they basically take out the Greeks and control Italy. You see actually the Alexandrian empires off to the east there, the Ptolemaic Greek Empire, the Seleucid Greek Empire, and the Antigonid Greek Empire. And also things you're seeing are like the Kingdom of Epirus, and then all the various city-states down here, including the Achaean League. And you see Carthage over here. And then, boom. Just almost everything I've talked about was between, in the last few videos, this map and this map. Just kaboom. That is massive expansion. They are the greatest power at the moment. Again, it seems like nothing is going to hold them down. But it's also at this point where we see some major, major problems. There's always problems. There's always things going on where there are tough times, or people get power hungry and things like that. But this is between basically this time and growing into this time, there's so much power to be had, especially if you're at the top of Roman politics, that basically the decisions of the people at the top really have long-lasting consequences, then hard-hitting short-term consequences as well. So, but again, they get bigger. Even though they're starting to see a lot of problems there, they're still getting bigger. They're still getting bigger. I mean, basically, by the way, between this point and getting into this point is where you start seeing civil wars happening in Rome, and yet while they're having civil wars, they're still expanding. Like, that's just unheard of in a lot of cases. Like, oh, we're going to have civil wars, but we're still conquering territory. Like, how does that happen? How are you so powerful you can do something like that? Again, but then they even get bigger. At this point, they're an empire. Like, between basically this map here and this map here is when Rome transfers from a republic to an empire. And then they keep getting bigger, and this is the largest extent of Roman expansion. I know I showed you these maps before, but hopefully it makes a little bit more sense as I give you a little bit more context in that. So, what are these problems I'm talking about? So, to end off this lesson, I'm going to talk about the problems, and the beginning of the next lesson, I'll start talking about all these, what I like to call band-aid fixes, that the Romans put in place to solve these problems. Like, they're actually great short-term fixes, but in many cases, in the long term, you could argue you end up hurting Rome in many respects because, well, I'll explain that in the next video, basically. So, here's some major problems. Again, this isn't all of them. This is just some pretty stark stuff. Is like, what are you doing? Like, you're undermining your entire power fabric. Now, before I actually bring these up, I do need to reemphasize, at the core of Roman power and prosperity, what they're founded on, why they're able to do so well, had a lot to do with all those Roman values. Again, whether we agree with them or not, doesn't matter. They held to them. And the things I'm going to put up here are definitely things that are seen to undermine or manipulate that Roman power and prosperity. Again, those values of discipline, self-sacrifice, devotion to founding a republic, and high morals. Again, it doesn't mean everybody lives by that. Holy cow, if everybody in Roman society lived by that 100%, yeah, unbeatable, unstoppable. Yeah, but it's more or less, it's kind of like in our society. We definitely teach and try to live by certain sets of morals and values. Doesn't mean everybody does. We definitely have problems, but if we have a huge amount of people not following those morals and values, yeah, our society is definitely not looking good. And the same thing for Rome. This is where we're starting to see that deterioration a little bit. Again, all the things I'm going to put up here, this isn't widespread. This is like stuff that's creeping up where, think about it this way. It's like you're having a good life, like most of us do, more or less. You read the newspaper and you read about something crappy that happened to someone out, say, in Arkansas or Virginia or down in California or some other area of Utah or something like that. It just seems, apart from it, it's like, wow, that should not have happened. That sucks to be that person. I'm glad that's not normal. That's, hopefully you can kind of look at these things that way, because that's the way most Romans would look at, I would assume most Romans would look at what I'm about to put up here. But again, it's the cracks that get larger and larger over time. So first off, senators and other large plantation owners start buying farms of poor farmers. And this idea where there's some shenanigans going on here and there, but also just this idea of like, hey, I'll buy your farm from you. And if you're just in some debt, maybe you just need to. But you're starting to see a lot of these small farmers just kind of going bye-bye. Basically, when we say small farmers, we could equivalent that, if this makes sense to you, to the middle class today. But then it gets a little bit worse. It's like, okay, I'll buy the farm from you. You can still work it, if you're in that debt. So, things are still good. But then all of a sudden, because they're winning so many wars and they're getting so many prisoners of war, that a lot of these large plantation owners, they're looking at the bottom line type thing. They're saying, you know what, it's a lot cheaper to have these slaves work on this land instead of these people I need to pay. And so, well, I'll just buy up some more farms, but I won't offer them money to work on those farms still. I'm just going to have some slaves move and do it. And so you're getting this kind of the beginnings of the Roman plantation system, these just large things. But then it gets even worse, is that these small farmers are usually the ones that are called up mostly on to go to war. Yes, you get a lot of the richer plantation owners. They go off to war as well. It's a very prestigious thing to do. That hasn't disappeared. In fact, again, you still have this idea that a lot of people, especially in the upper ranks of Roman society, are like, I need to go to war. I need to establish my place in Roman society by having that prestige behind me. But who makes up the core of those guys that are doing this, just the down in the dirt, mud crunching fighting? It's mostly those small farmers that are basically making up those ranks of Romans. And at this point, you're seeing a lot of them going off and getting hurt, or they're away from their families and their farms a lot longer, or they're coming, and then when they come back, they're maimed in a way where they can't work their farms as well, and then they get bought out. And that's not illegal. It's not cool, but it's not illegal the way this is going. The Romans just had this idea that, well, families were supposed to take care of things, but all of a sudden, in some cases, you don't see that happening. And so you get a lot of these landless poor farmers, these returning soldiers, and then just other people, for whatever reason, that start moving into the city of Rome because there's just nowhere else to go, and forming, for, you could say the first time, a very large group of urban poor. And these people that are simply more like beggars than anything else, just trying to kind of make their way and trying to find their way through life. And this is a huge hit for a lot of these people, especially soldiers and farmers who were used to providing for themselves and providing for their families and defending their country and having that all there, and then to be kind of in this position, that's a huge hit to kind of your sense of honor, your sense of just self-worth and things like that. And it's also one of those things where everybody else looks at it and is like, well, this wasn't supposed to happen. And what's going on here? But no one really knows what to do about it at the moment. At least at this moment. And this never goes away, really. Well, it goes away here and there, but it becomes a persistent problem in Roman society. This idea of like, what do we do? How do we deal with this? Anyways, and by the way, every society has had this. Every single society in human history has had this happen, including our society today. What do you do in these cases? Anyways, I'll just leave it there, but I hope you're getting this idea that this isn't cool. Like, this is definitely showing cracks in in the um, the foundations and the founding kind of ideas of Roman power and prosperity. That even though they're doing incredibly well, they're expanding. It seems like everything is good, but you're just seeing those foundations starting to crack a bit. I do need to just say one more thing on the idea of, like, there are people that are realizing this, or seeing this happening and realizing they can use it to their advantage, to where you get some very Pisistratus type of characters into Roman politics and kind of at the height of Roman power. And just, for instance, there's a few wars, one in particular that I'm thinking of, where there's a few senators realizing, hey, every single time we win one of these wars, the Senate takes over command of these territories, and they decide who kind of gets it. And usually the senators have been saying, well, my family can take control of this for the good of Rome. But of course, that senator then gets very, very rich off of just controlling that territory. And so they're like, well, let's make up excuses to go to war, fabricate claims, however you want to put that, against certain areas, so that when we take it, we can make sure that we get assigned. I can get assigned that land and enrich myself and my family and things like that. And it'll be easy because all I have to do is fabricate that claim, and then we'll have our tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of volunteers that will basically trust their government and go off to war feeling like that they're doing the best they can and advancing the glory and the defense of Rome and Roman prestige and honor and yada, yada, yada. Which you don't hold that against the people volunteering for war, but they're totally trusting what their leaders are telling them. In this case, you're having a few where you're getting some fabricated stuff going on. So I encourage you to look this stuff up on your own. At least how the specific stories go, because there's a lot more that goes into that one. I'm definitely summarizing a bit here, but just one last time, cracks are starting to appear in there's basically the foundation of Roman power and prosperity that will ultimately lead towards the downfall of the Republic, and then also the downfall of the Roman Empire overall. There's a lot more problems coming down the line for that one. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video as we start talking about some of these Band-Aid fixes to deal with these problems.